Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, guys, today I'm going to read about the suicide of Patrice Vic. He was a Scientologist. Died 24th March 1988, Lyon trial. French press report, 9:30. The trial would not have taken place without the insistence of Nellie Vic, who witnessed the suicide of her husband, Patrice, on 24th of March 1988. At that time, their children were 3 and 8 years old. Discussion of Patrice Vic's involvement, same as an article from Elle Express posted earlier. On the 28th of March, accompanied by Jean-Jacques Mazière, he informed his wife that he decided to borrow 30,000 FFR for the second stage of his induction into Scientology, a purification cure. 6 hours later, he entered his children's bedroom, opened the window, and leapt to his death. The day after, Nellie Vic filed charges. Paris, France, 1996. Der Spiegel, issue 41. His young widow filed a criminal complaint, but it was 7.5 years before the people who first turned the industrial designer into an unapproachable loner with their constantly increasing demands for money and then drove him to suicide with their psychoterrorism were brought to court. The criminal court hearing took place last week against 22 Scientologists. Say that again. Against 22 Scientologists charged with collective fraud in illegally practicing medicine, government, FBI, Homeland Security, IRS, and against Jean-Jacques Mazière, cult chief at the time, who was also charged with homicide. That should have happened with Susan Meister and a whole bunch of others. Lyon trial. French press report 210. On the first day of the trial, J.J. Mazière presented himself as a man of the church cult. Today, his personnel has repeated the statements about religious activities in order to push out any questions about methods, about finances, and about the international aspects of Scientology. They always do that with the religion. All statements centered on their own history as church adherents and left no impression of the possible circumstances in which Patrice Vic would have been driven to suicide. They hounded him so much for money that he felt like he didn't have any other way. Scientology of blazing successes. Le Progrès, 02/10/1996. I believe he was 24 years old as well. Another contradiction on the subject of the suicide of Patrice Vic. According to Jean-Jacques Mazière, a member cannot begin the purification treatment without his wife's consent. Since it cannot begin with a lie, that did not prevent Jean-Jacques Mazière from explaining that one of the checks destined for the Dianetics Center had found its way into his personal account by saying that he had rendered services to a member who wanted to keep his new religion secret from his wife. I don't really understand that. It just sounds like, like throwing spaghetti so it'll stick to the wall. Lyon trial, French press report 310. It's written on the badge that the Scientologists wear. They're happy. Tuesday, 23 adherents, the accused, we assume, told the court how happy they were. They always do. Yesterday, former adherents, the civil parties in the case, told of the difficulties involved in leaving and the dangers être perle. I'm not reading that. That's French. I don't understand. Lyon trial, French press report 410. Thusly states Jean-Marie Abral, the youngest adherent, Patrice Vic, who was preparing himself for a purification cure, found himself faced with an impossible choice, his family or Scientology. His suicide, according to Dr. Begral, was inevitable. He attributes the problems of kidney hepatitis and brain of the adherent to a taking of vitamins in high doses. The disciple poisons himself with his own waste products. His liver and kidney stop working, in the opinion of the expert. Lyon trial, French press, report 510. A semantic counteroffensive intended to bestow on Scientology the status of a politically religion treated like an anti-cultural phenomenon. This is the credo of the Italian Massimo Introvinghe, founder of the Center of Studies of New Religious Turin, Cessner. He is indignated by the French polemic on sex. He pleads for a more nuanced view on new religious movements. He is ironic. I ask myself if there are really more suicides in Scientology than in the French police or amongst Italian religious students. Lyon trial, French press report 710, 810. The prosecutor referred to in Saturday's report as the Minister de Public demanded 3 years of prison, Troy, and de prison avec sursis, and a fine of, I don't know what that is, 500,000 FFR, maybe francs, for the former leader of Scientology in Lyon. Yep, little Davy, he had to pay. Jean-Jacques Mazière, J.J. Mazière, is accused of atteinte involontaire à la vie d'autrui. Sounds like involuntary murder or wrongful death, possibly. I don't know. Which I've translated as manslaughter. He is accused of being the cause of suicide in 1988 of Patrice Vic, of an adherent of the sect. The charge should, in my opinion, of Mr. Richard, be altered to homicide involontaire. This could well be the actual charge of manslaughter, i.e., I might have mistranslated. Too bad. Lyon trial, French press report 910. The client of Mr. Leborgne answers to his role in the suicide of Patrice Vic, a 31-year-old he was older, a 31-year-old adherent. His lawyer claimed that this accusation was fabrication romanesque. He attributed the depressed state of this father of two to an unease, maltrait, to an old suffering. According to him, outside the walls of this courthouse, one can condemn Scientology morally, sociologically, religiously, but one cannot condemn them in terms of penal law. New York Times, 22 November 96. The founder and former head of the Church of Scientology in Lyons was convicted of fraud and involuntary homicide today in the death of a church member who committed suicide after going heavily into debt to pay the sect for counseling sessions. A French tribunal sentenced the defendant Jean-Jacques Mazière to serve 18 months in prison with an additional 18 months suspended and fined him $100,000. Is it just me, or is that a pretty light sentence? Ex-leader of church convicted. 12 Scientologists given lesser terms. Yeah, they got it paid. Associated Press, 22 November 1996. Last month's trial centered on the March 1988 suicide of Patrice Vic, 31, who jumped from a window to his death. The trial centered around Vic's death, but its scope widened as investigators uncovered evidence of financial wrongdoing, and more Scientology officials were charged. Prosecutors said Vic was under pressure from the church to take a $6,000 purification treatment, including daily sauna treatments and a low-sugar, high-vitamin diet. Vic was subjected to psychological torture, the court said in its 200-page ruling. Lyon trial. French press report on verdict, November 23, 1996. The Court of Lyon sentenced on Friday 15 members of the sect prosecuted after the suicide of an adherent in March 1988. On October 8th, in the course of a trial lasting 7 days, the responsibilities in Lyon of the Church of Scientology heard the public prosecutor demand suspended prison sentences. The Criminal Court Tribunal Correctional in Lyon, giving judgment on Friday, went further. Jean-Jacques Mazière, accused of atteinte involontaire à la liberté, attrou, and tentative d'escroquerie, was sentenced to 18 months in prison, not suspended, and a further 18 months suspended, as well as a fine of $500,000 FFR, which I think are francs. 14 other accused were sentenced in between 3 years and 18 months of prison, and fines between $10,000 and $500,000 FFR for tentative. Anyways, I'm not going to read all that French. Finally, so they just go into the French terms of what they were charged. Finally, 8 other members, mostly in senior positions in the sect, among them Danielle Gonard, national spokesperson, went free. Time magazine, January 27, 1997. Nellie Vick said that in early 1988, Patrice was restless and grew distant from her and their 2 children. By the way, they don't let the wife and the husband talk about leaving. And some of them will talk amongst themselves of leaving Scientology, but they don't allow it, and if it does happen, they get that information in people's security checks. Really sick. Okay, I'm going to start over. Nellie Vick said in early 1988, Patrice was restless and grew distant from her and their 2 children. The cost of his courses was a source of tension. In May that year, she said she received a visit from local Scientology president Jean-Jacques Mazière, suggesting a further course for Patrice at a cost of $6,000. That evening, Nellie Vick recounted, "My husband was agitated. He kept hyperventilating. Early the next morning, he said, 'I can't help it, it's the only solution.' As her children, then aged 3 and 8, watched, she said, Patrice went to the balcony of their 12th floor flat and stepped off." That is so sad. Associated Press, 28th July 1997. A French appeals court reduced the sentence Monday for a Church of Scientology leader convicted of involuntary homicide in the suicide of a member. The lower court said in November that Jean-Jacques Mazière had subjected Vic to psychological torture. Do you guys hear that? FBI, LAPD, psychological torture, anybody. He was convicted of both involuntary homicide and fraud and sentenced to a 3-year jail term, with 18 months of it suspended. On Monday, the appeals court said Mazier's sentence was too harsh and suspended his sentence, meaning, oh my God, meaning no jail time. Whew. He still must pay an $83,000 fine. So he helps to cause this guy's death, and all he gets is a fine. Isn't that nice? France 3, News, July 28, 1997. Attorney Lacer for the family of the suicided person. I am believing that the most important here for the posing to Scientology party is the fact that second-degree murder has been recognized, and that also fraud has been recognized. Yvette Genesee, president of the Lyons French Can, the ADFI, the essential for me is the fact that one retained Mr. Vic, the suicided person, has committed suicide, not because of M. Maziere, but because M. Maziere was under the Scientology's founder influence, and that he used L. Ron Hubbard technologies. That's what is important for us here. French prosecutor to appeal Scientology case. AP 29th July 1997. You see what they do with all these labor slaves' money? This is what they do. A day after a French court reduced the sentence of a Church of Scientology leader convicted of involuntary homicide, the prosecution said it would appeal the decision. The court also threw out the convictions of 9 Scientologists on charges of theft, complicity, or abuse of confidence, and reduced the fines of 4 others. Too bad Vic didn't get a chance, did he? I always say clown courts, you guys. Lyon Supreme Court of Appeal, Criminal Division, 30 June 1999. Basically, this court upheld the guilty verdict of Maziere by the initial appeals court, but didn't adjust the sentences back to the ordinary court ruling before that. Provided here are 2 translations, the first by Roger Gonnet, and the second by Google. That the appeal judges have upheld the accusation of Mr. J.J., Mr. C, wife B, and DP, wife G, leaders of Lyon's associations, by way of authors of the swindles and some others prevented in the capacity of as accomplices, depending that the first, with the assistance and the assistance of the seconds, had made Center of Dianetic and Church of Scientology of Lyon of the companies of collecting of funds to the damage of their followers by employing 2 kinds of fraudulent schemes. Scientology got blamed for French suicide. St. Petersburg Times, 8 February 1998. Nellie Vic's sad eyes begin telling her story even before she gets to the part about how her husband jumped to his death from their children's bedroom window. Oh, now they changed his age. I think it's supposed to be 31. The 31-year-old, oh no. Okay, no, the 41-year-old widow puts her head up in her hands and swallows hard as she recalls that last night before her husband, Patrice, jumped from the 12th floor window. Next to her sits a son, now 13, who slept through his father's suicide. Isn't that horrible? So, you guys, I will put the link to this article in the description box. This also came from Xenonet. Peace, everyone.